this episode, we're going to take two ideas that sound administrative at first, asset inventory and data classification, and show why they are actually foundational to strong security controls. If you do not know what systems you have, where they are, and what they do, it becomes nearly impossible to protect them consistently, because security decisions depend on understanding what exists. In the same way, if you do not know what kinds of data you store and how sensitive that data is, you cannot choose the right safeguards, because you might protect low-risk information heavily while leaving high-risk information exposed. For a payment environment, these two practices are especially important because cardholder data requires stronger controls and clearer boundaries than ordinary business data. Asset inventory tells you what needs protection, and data classification tells you how much protection is required, so together they guide control strength in a logical way. We are going to keep this beginner-friendly by focusing on concepts, not tools, and by using simple examples you can picture in real organizations. By the end, you should understand how inventories and classification reduce blind spots, how they support consistent security decisions, and why they are essential to doing security well. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Let's start with what an asset is in cybersecurity terms, because people often think only of laptops and servers. An asset is anything of value that supports the organization's work, especially anything that stores, processes, transmits, or controls access to data. That includes obvious things like workstations, servers, and network devices, but also less obvious things like applications, virtual machines, cloud services, accounts, certificates, and even certain business processes that depend on technology. Assets can be physical, like a point-of-sale terminal, or logical, like a database instance or an application programming interface. The reason we care is that every asset can introduce risk if it is misconfigured, unpatched, or used in ways it was not intended to be used. In payment environments, the assets that touch cardholder data are particularly sensitive because they can directly affect confidentiality and trust. Beginners should get comfortable with the idea that assets are not just objects. They are components of a system that makes the business run. When you inventory assets, you are building the map you need to defend the environment. An asset inventory is a structured record of what assets exist, who owns them, where they are, and what they are used for. At a minimum, a useful inventory includes a unique identifier for each asset, a description, the responsible owner, and key attributes like location, function, and whether it is in scope for payment security controls. A stronger inventory also includes lifecycle details, like when it was acquired, when it is expected to be replaced, and what maintenance or patching responsibilities apply. This matters because security is not a one-time setup. Assets change, move, get upgraded, get repurposed, and sometimes get forgotten. Forgotten assets are one of the most common sources of security risk because they are often not patched, not monitored, and not included in normal control checks. In payment environments, a forgotten system that still has access to cardholder data can create a hidden pathway for attackers. For beginners, a helpful mindset is that you cannot protect what you cannot see, and inventory is what makes assets visible. Ownership is a critical part of asset inventory because controls require responsibility. If no one owns an asset, then no one is accountable for patching it, monitoring it, or deciding how it should be configured. Ownership also helps during incidents because responders need to know who can answer questions about what the system does, what normal behavior looks like, and what changes are safe to make. In many organizations, assets fall into gray zones where one team uses them, but another team manages them, which can lead to gaps if roles are unclear. Inventory helps by making those relationships explicit, such as naming a business owner and a technical owner when both perspectives are needed. For payment-related assets, ownership also helps determine who is responsible for meeting specific control requirements and for documenting evidence of compliance. Beginners should understand that ownership is not about blame. It is about clarity, so important tasks do not fall through the cracks. When ownership is clear, control strength becomes easier to maintain because someone is always responsible for keeping protections intact. Now let's shift to data classification, which is the practice of labeling data based on how sensitive it is and what protections it needs. Classification answers questions like how harmful it would be if this data were exposed, changed incorrectly, or unavailable when needed. In many organizations, classification includes categories such as public information, internal information, confidential information, and highly sensitive information, but the exact labels can vary. What matters is that the organization defines categories clearly and ties each category to handling rules, like where the data can be stored, who can access it, and how it must be protected. In a payment environment, cardholder data is typically treated as highly sensitive because exposure can lead to fraud and serious obligations to notify and remediate. Classification also applies to other sensitive data that might be present, such as authentication secrets, encryption keys, customer identity information, or incident investigation materials. For beginners, classification is like putting labels on boxes before moving houses, because the label tells you how carefully to handle it. Without labels, everything gets treated the same, which is risky and inefficient. Data classification is only useful if it connects to data handling rules that people can actually follow. A classification label should map to decisions about access control, encryption, logging, retention, and disposal, and those decisions should be consistent across systems. For example, highly sensitive data might require stronger access controls, more detailed logging, stricter retention, and secure disposal methods, while lower sensitivity data might have lighter requirements. This is what we mean by control strength, which is choosing safeguards that match the risk of the asset and the data it holds. Control strength is not about maximum security everywhere, because maximum security everywhere can be so expensive and disruptive that people bypass it. Instead, control strength is about right-sized security, where you invest the strongest controls where they matter most. Beginners should understand that security is a resource allocation problem as well as a technical problem. Classification helps solve that problem by making risk visible and by guiding consistent decisions across the organization. Inventory and classification work together because assets are where data lives and moves. A data classification program that does not connect to specific assets is hard to implement, because you cannot apply controls if you do not know where the data is stored or processed. In the same way, an asset inventory without data context tells you what exists but not what is important, which can lead to poor prioritization. When you link inventory to classification, you can answer questions like which systems store cardholder data, which systems transmit it, which systems process it, and which systems should never touch it at all. That linkage is essential for scoping and segmentation in payment security, because you need to know where the sensitive environment begins and ends. It also helps in incident response, because if a system is compromised, you can quickly assess whether it handled sensitive data and what the likely impact is. Beginners should picture this as a map with layers, where assets are the roads and buildings, and data sensitivity is the heat map showing where the highest risk areas are. The combination gives you a much clearer picture of what to defend most strongly. A major reason these practices matter is that they reduce security blind spots, and blind spots are where attackers often succeed. A blind spot might be an untracked cloud service spun up for a short project and then left running with weak settings. It might be a forgotten user account, a test database copied from production, or a file share that quietly accumulates sensitive data over time. It might be a vendor integration that pulls data into a system that was never designed to protect it. Inventory helps you find the assets, and classification helps you notice when sensitive data has drifted into the wrong place. Data drift is common because people copy data for convenience, debugging, or reporting, and then forget to remove it. Over time, the organization ends up with sensitive data scattered across places that were never meant to store it. For beginners, it helps to think of this like leaving important documents in random drawers throughout a house, where you cannot easily secure them or even remember where they are. Inventory and classification are how you prevent that scatter and regain control. Control strength also depends on understanding asset criticality, meaning how important an asset is to business operations and what happens if it fails. An asset might not store sensitive data, but it could still be critical because it supports authentication, routing, or monitoring. For example, a system that handles identity verification might be a high-value target even if it does not store payment data directly, because compromising it can give access to other systems. Asset inventory often includes attributes that support this, such as criticality ratings and dependencies, which help prioritize patching, monitoring, and resilience planning. In payment environments, certain supporting systems can affect the security of the cardholder data environment even if they are not obviously part of it, like management interfaces or administrative tooling. Beginners should understand that security prioritization is not just about what data is stored, but also about what control systems make access possible. When you consider both data sensitivity and asset criticality, you can choose stronger controls for high-risk, high-impact components. This makes security smarter, not just stricter. Another concept beginners should understand is that asset inventory and classification are not one-time projects, because environments change constantly. New assets appear through procurement, cloud deployments, software updates, and vendor integrations, and old assets should be retired cleanly so they do not become hidden liabilities. Data classification also changes when business processes change, such as when a new payment flow is added or when an application starts collecting additional customer information. Maintaining these programs requires processes, like ensuring new assets are registered before they go live and ensuring new data uses are reviewed for classification and handling requirements. It also requires periodic reviews to catch drift, because drift is inevitable in real organizations. A mature approach treats inventory and classification as ongoing operational hygiene, similar to keeping a kitchen clean rather than doing a massive cleanup once a year. For beginners, the key message is that security work often looks like steady maintenance, not dramatic interventions. When you keep inventories and classifications current, many problems become easier because you are not constantly surprised by unknown systems or unknown data. As we finish, the main idea is that asset inventory and data classification are the foundations that make control strength possible, because they tell you what exists and how strongly it needs to be protected. Inventory creates visibility and ownership, reducing forgotten systems and unclear responsibility, which are common sources of security failures. Classification makes data sensitivity explicit and ties it to handling rules so that controls like access, encryption, logging, and retention can be applied consistently. When you link assets to the data they hold and move, you can define clear payment security boundaries, prioritize protections intelligently, and respond faster when something goes wrong. These practices also reduce blind spots and data drift, which are two of the most common ways sensitive information ends up exposed. For a new learner, the most important mindset shift is realizing that strong security is not only about advanced tools. It begins with knowing what you have and what you are protecting. When inventories and classifications are accurate and maintained, the rest of security becomes clearer, more consistent, and far more effective.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.